It was early evening in the town of Lirod, a charming French village nestled in the southern region where the golden sun lingered long past its farewell. The streets were laced with cobblestones, and the air held that familiar stillness that only came during summer's end, quiet, gentle, and patient. Children's laughter had long faded, leaving only the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional sound of clinking plates from an open cafe window. In the heart of the village stood a house unlike any other. It wasn't grand nor opulent, but it had character, walls painted a soft butter yellow, and shutters dressed in the deepest shade of green, vibrant even against the late daylight. The house appeared as though it had bloomed straight from the ground, like one of the many oleanders growing along the edge of the square. Their pale pink petals brushed against the stone facade, casting shadows that danced in the golden light. Inside, behind the glass of the ground floor window, stood a tall man with striking auburn hair and thoughtful emerald eyes. His name was Elian Rousseau, an artist newly arrived from the city of Marseille, seeking solace in Lirod's quiet corners. He had moved into the house only a few weeks ago, yet it already felt like home, a place where each creak in the floorboards whispered stories, where sunlight seemed to pause just to watch him paint. Elian had grown tired of the noise and speed of city life. In Marseille, every moment was consumed by urgency, clients, deadlines, exhibitions. But here, time slowed, like honey poured from a spoon. Here, he could breathe. More importantly, he could create. This evening, Elian stood by the window, not with a brush in hand, but with a still heart. He watched the square outside, where a cat stretched lazily atop a stone bench, and two elderly men played dominoes near a fountain, their conversation barely audible above the burble of water. A woman in a red skirt wheeled her bicycle past, her basket brimming with lavender and apricots. Elian smiled to himself. It was exactly this kind of scene that called him here. He turned from the window and glanced around his studio, a room filled with canvases, some completed, others barely touched. His latest piece, still resting on the easel, captured a grove of peach trees in bloom, their petals rendered in delicate strokes of rose and white. The paint was still drying. But for tonight, he needed rest. He stretched, rolled his shoulders, and crossed the room to gather a few things. A thin blue coat hung on the wall, alongside his worn straw hat. He reached for both. From a drawer, he took a small coin pouch and an old sketchbook with torn edges and pages stained by time. As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, his face still bearing streaks of green and amber from earlier work. He chuckled, wiping his cheek with a rag. Before stepping out, he paused at the threshold. His bedroom, modest and sunlit, awaited his return. A bed with a turmeric yellow frame, 2 chairs, and a small table filled the room. But it was the paintings lining the walls that made it feel alive, colorful landscapes, starry skies, and imagined meadows all spilling into the space like living dreams. With the softest click, he closed the door behind him and descended the narrow staircase. Downstairs, the air was cooler, scented with lemon and aged wood. He passed the unused guest room, which he promised himself he would decorate soon with more of his work. The hallway echoed faintly under his boots as he reached the front door and opened it to the evening air. Outside, the light had shifted. Shadows had grown longer, and the world wore a soft blue hue. Grass sprouted gently between the cobblestones as Elian stepped onto the street. He took a deep breath. The breeze was warm, with the scent of the Rhone River that curved lazily along the edge of the town. That's where he would go. Elian began his walk slowly, letting his feet decide the direction. The town unfolded around him like a painting in motion, balconies draped in ivy, candlelit cafes humming with life, and windows open just enough to hear piano notes drifting out. He passed the bakery, closed now but still fragrant with bread. A black and white dog dozed near the door. A boy waved to him from a balcony, and Elian returned the wave with a smile. But the true pull of the evening was the river. The Rhone glimmered in the distance, catching the last rays of sun like liquid silver. Elian loved sitting by its edge. During the day, he would sketch the reeds and rocks and marvel at how the green of the plants shifted depending on where the sun hit them. At night, the stars above would reflect in the water, their flickering forms curling across the surface like a trail of dreams. Elian thought of a new painting, a composition of starlight bending in ripples, mixed with shadows of trees and the curve of the riverbank. He made a note of it in his sketchbook as he walked. Tonight, though, he wasn't rushing. The journey itself was his muse. His footsteps were steady. The sounds of the town faded behind him, replaced by the rhythm of his thoughts and the gentle chirps of crickets. He passed a vineyard and paused to touch a low-hanging vine, fingers brushing against a grape cluster not yet ripe. Memories surfaced: his grandfather's old house, the smell of his mother's oil paints, the first time he held a brush with trembling fingers. In that moment, the lines between past and present blurred, and everything felt whole. When Elian finally reached the river, he sat on a patch of grass, removed his hat, and looked up. The sky was vast, painted in indigo and violet, with stars just beginning to bloom. The river whispered beside him, an eternal companion. He closed his eyes. No more galleries. No more noise. Just this. Just the stars. Just the canvas waiting to be filled. The wind shifted slightly as Elian sat by the river, his fingers resting lightly on the open pages of his sketchbook. The light from the town behind him faded into warm glows of amber and soft orange. Before him, the Rhone stretched out like a ribbon of ink, reflecting constellations just beginning to assert themselves in the deepening sky. He loved this place for how it never rushed him. Even the river seemed to drift without purpose, content to exist between banks of rock and reeds, carrying whispers from the mountains to the sea. Just as he was about to close his eyes and surrender to the silence, the sound of footsteps reached his ears, light, careful, approaching from behind. Elian turned slightly. A woman emerged from the shadows of a narrow path that twisted down from the village hill. She wore a long, pale coat and carried what looked like a small satchel over her shoulder. Her hair was dark and tied loosely, strands dancing along her cheekbones in the breeze. She didn't appear startled to see him there. Instead, she offered a quiet nod and continued toward the water, eventually settling a few paces away on a flat rock, facing the same moonlit river. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the air between them soft but somehow electric. "Beautiful night," she said, her voice calm, deliberate. "It is," Elian replied, adjusting his position. "I didn't expect anyone else to be out here. It's usually just me and the river." The woman smiled faintly, still gazing forward. "It used to be someone else, a long time ago." Elian raised a brow. "What do you mean?" She glanced at him now, and in her eyes was a glint of something familiar, a depth he recognized in artists, in people who carried stories behind their silence. "My name is Orally," she said. "I was born in this village. Left years ago, but I come back sometimes. When I miss the way the air smells at night." "Elian," he replied. "I just moved here from Marseille." "Artist?" "I thought so," she said, her lips curving into a smile. "The way you were staring at the water. Not many people do that unless they're about to write a poem or paint the sky." He chuckled. "Both, actually." Oraly's eyes softened. "Did you know another painter once lived here? In that yellow house at the center of town. He painted stars too." Elian's breath caught. "You mean Vincent van Gogh?" She nodded. "My grandmother used to tell stories about him. How he would sit by this river for hours. She was a little girl back then, but she remembered the way he carried himself. As if he were always chasing something that only he could see." Elian looked back toward the water. "I think I understand that." They sat again in silence, both staring at the soft ripples and pale gold streaks reflecting from the sky. The moon was fuller now, climbing. "He wrote letters," Orally added. "Dozens of them. To his brother. To artists. They say he described this place in vivid color, fields of gold, blue shadows on whitewashed walls, and the green shutters of his bedroom window. He was always trying to trap beauty before it slipped away." Elian turned his sketchbook toward her, revealing a half-finished drawing of a starry river. "Do you think it slips away, or do we just forget how to see it?" She didn't answer immediately. "Then, maybe both." The river stirred gently below, as though agreeing. Orally pulled a small leather book from her satchel. "I brought something," she said. "I don't know why. It just felt like the right night." She handed it to him. The cover was worn, edges scuffed. Inside, he found pages of delicate script, mostly in French, snippets of thoughts, poems, and sketches that looked like they belonged to a different century. "My grandmother's journal," she explained. "She lived here all her life. Kept notes on everyone. Including the painter." Elian turned a few pages, pausing at a drawing, two figures under a tree, one painting, the other watching. The details were simple, but something in the expression on the painter's face felt hauntingly familiar. "That's her," Orally said. "And him. She used to follow him, silently. Said she didn't need to speak to understand what he saw." "Did she ever talk to him?" Elian asked. "No. But she said he noticed her, once. Gave her a small sketch on torn paper. She kept it until the day she died." The pages turned softly in Elian's hands, as if breathing. He looked up at Orally, suddenly aware that this night had become something different, less about rest, and more about something stirring, awakening. The connection between memory, art, and the ghosts that lingered in color. "I'd like to paint this," he said. "The moment. The river. You. The story. I'd like to see that," Orally replied. And just like that, something shifted between them, not romantic, not yet, but profound. A shared silence, as sacred as any prayer. The stars bloomed fully above them now, and the river reflected every shimmer. Elian closed the book gently and held it to his chest. "Do you believe we ever really leave behind those who saw the world as we do?" Orally's voice was soft, "Only if we stop painting." The next morning arrived with the gentlest of sunlight spilling through the green shutters of Elian's bedroom. Dust danced in the air like lazy fireflies, and the warm scent of oil paint lingered from the night before. He lay in bed for a few moments, eyes still closed, replaying the conversation with Orally beside the river, the softness of her voice, the stories she told, the journal she shared. As he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was one of his own paintings hanging slightly askew. A landscape of almond trees in bloom, light pinks and whites colliding with sky blue. But now, even this familiar scene seemed altered, infused with a kind of new depth after their encounter. It was as if Orally had passed a key into his hand, one that unlocked doors he never realized were closed. He got up slowly, reached for his sketchbook, and began to scribble. Words at first, memories from last night, and then shapes. A woman's silhouette against the water. A ribbon of moonlight bending across the river. The idea for a new piece grew with every line. After washing up and making a modest breakfast, fresh bread, cheese, and a warm cup of chicory coffee, Elian found himself drawn toward the hallway. Specifically, toward the guest bedroom he had passed so many times without stopping. Last night, something Orally said returned to him. He used to sit there, even when he wasn't painting. As if he were listening to something inside the walls. The door creaked open. The room was modest. Bare walls, a single window, and old wooden floorboards that groaned underfoot. A simple bed frame leaned against the far wall, untouched. Dusty canvas stretchers were stacked in the corner, forgotten by time. Elian stepped inside and stood still, waiting not for a sound, but for a feeling. It came. A subtle pull. His fingers brushed the wall beneath the window, where the light hit the paint in an unusual way. There was a faint outline like a crack, but deliberate, forming a small rectangle. He pressed. It gave slightly under pressure. Curious, he fetched a palette knife from his studio and returned, kneeling by the wall. With careful movements, he slipped the edge beneath the seam and pried it open. A panel came loose. Behind it was a shallow cavity, and within, something wrapped in faded linen. His heart thudded. Unwrapping it, he found a small wooden box, its brass clasp rusted but still intact. With some effort, he opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, brittle with age. A sketch. It was unmistakably Van Gogh's hand. Swift, expressive lines formed a study of the same window Elian now knelt beneath. A corner of the bed frame. The pattern of light across the floor. There, in the corner of the page, an inscription, "Pour la petite fille qui regardait en silence." For the little girl who watched in silence. Elian sat back on his heels. Could it be Aurélie's grandmother? The sketch Vincent had supposedly given her. And beneath it, another layer, a piece of canvas, rolled tightly. When Elian unrolled it, he gasped. A miniature oil study, an early version of the bedroom, but warmer in tone, more intimate. The brushwork was hurried yet intentional. This was no replica. It was a test, perhaps painted just for himself. For a moment, Elian felt a wave of vertigo. Here he was, sitting on the floor of his own guest room, holding history. A piece of the artist's soul, hidden for over a century. That afternoon, he wrote a letter to Aurélie, asking her to meet him at the house. He didn't want to say too much, only that there was something she had to see. Hours later, she arrived. The same calm in her gaze, but with a curious smile playing at her lips. "I couldn't stop thinking about our talk," she said. "I kept wondering what he saw when he looked at this town." Elian led her to the guest room, heart thudding like a metronome. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. "I haven't been in here since I was a child," she murmured. "My grandmother used to say this was the soul of the house." Without a word, Elian handed her the folded sketch. She opened it slowly. Her eyes widened. Her fingers trembled. This is her," she whispered. "She told me about this, but I thought it was just a memory she embellished with time." "It was real," Elian said quietly. "And there's more." He showed her the painting. Tears welled in her eyes. "She kept his secret all her life," she said. "She must have known someone would find it one day." "And now it's us," Elian said. They sat together in the room, side by side on the dusty wooden floor, staring at the small canvas. The light from the window had shifted, casting long golden shadows on the wall. In that moment, it felt like three stories had collided: Vincent's, the grandmother's, and their own. I think we should do something with this," Aurélie said. "Show it?" not in a gallery. Here. In this house. A memory room, Elian said. For him. For her. For anyone who listens. The next few days passed like a dream. They cleaned the guest room, careful not to disturb its soul. Elian mounted the sketch behind glass and placed the canvas on a small easel. Orally brought candles, dried lavender, and a small notebook for visitors to write thoughts. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a conversation with the past. One evening, as they stood in the finished room, Orally turned to him. "You've made something beautiful here," she said. "We did," he replied. They lingered in the doorway, neither ready to leave. Through the window, the stars began to appear once again, soft lights in an eternal sky. It had been 3 days since they uncovered the secret behind the wall in the guest room. And yet, Elian found himself returning to that space over and over again, like it was a chapel, quiet, sacred, filled with echoes he didn't yet understand. He would sit in the corner with his sketchbook, sometimes drawing, sometimes simply staring at the small framed sketch of the window. It had become more than just art. It was a relic. A passage through time. And every now and then, when the wind was just right and the shadows in the room leaned long, he imagined the house breathing, exhaling the memory of that man who once stood in this very place, paint on his fingers, sorrow in his soul. Orally had been visiting every afternoon. She brought new items with her each time, pressed flowers, old books from her grandmother's collection, and even a photograph of her as a child sitting on the window ledge. Together, they transformed the guest room into something that existed between past and present. Neither fully museum, nor home, something in between. But on the fourth evening, just before sunset, something changed. Elian had been cleaning the glass of the sketch frame, when he noticed it, a faint edge of parchment protruding from behind the brown backing board. At first, he thought it was just a scrap left from the frame's construction, but the texture felt different. More delicate. Older. Carefully, he opened the frame. What he found sent a shiver through his spine. A letter. Folded tightly, sealed with no wax, and pressed so flat that it could easily have been mistaken for part of the backing. Its edges were frayed, the ink faded to a sepia hue. On the front was written a single name, Theo. Vincent's brother. Elian's hands shook. He placed the letter on the table and sat down, staring at it for a long moment. There was a kind of weight to it that wasn't physical, a presence. A breath from a soul long gone but somehow still watching. When Orally arrived an hour later, she found him sitting in silence, the letter unopened. "What is it?" she asked softly. He turned to her with wide eyes. I think it's real. A letter. From him. To his brother." She stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You haven't read it?" "I couldn't. Not without you." They sat together at the table, and under the soft light of a single candle, Elian broke the brittle fold. The letter was written in French, eloquent, hurried, filled with emotional weight. Theo. The days are warm here, and the light still calls me. Even in the moments when I feel nothing inside, the sun insists I must see, and so I do. The little girl watches me again. I never speak, but I know she understands. There is comfort in being seen without words. Her silence helps me remember what gentleness feels like. I painted a study today of the window. Light moves differently here. It crawls across the floor like a lover, not a thief. It reminds me that there is still beauty in motion. If I do not send this letter, and it remains hidden, perhaps it is because it is not for you but for whoever finds it when I am long gone. And if that is you, stranger, then I ask only one thing. Let what I saw be seen again. Let beauty survive me. V. Orally didn't speak for a long time. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the paper, tracing the fading ink. It's like he knew someone else would be here one day, she whispered. That someone else would care enough to listen. Elian swallowed hard. Maybe that's us. She nodded. Maybe. The discovery of the letter changed something between them, not just the story they were telling, but the way they told it. Elian felt as though he had inherited something fragile and profound. And with Orally by his side, he wasn't just uncovering history, he was becoming part of it. That night, they sat on the roof of the yellow house, the stars above glowing brighter than ever before. The village below was silent, lights dimmed, doors closed. But up here, the world remained open. They spoke in low tones about the letter, the house, the journey. They laughed over tea and argued over translations. And somewhere between the stories and starlight, Elian reached for her hand. Not with urgency. Not with expectation. Just presence. She let him. And so they sat, hands entwined, beneath the same sky that once inspired Vincent's brush. The same stars. The same river not far away. But now, with new eyes watching. The following morning, Elian began a new painting. It wasn't of the river or the orchards. It was of the guest room. The window. The light. The sketch on the wall. A small girl standing quietly in the corner, and the echo of a man barely visible seated with brush in hand. He called it whispering light. It was not meant for galleries or fame. It was meant for this house. For those who wandered in, curious. And for those who, like Vincent, saw the world in color even when others could not. The wind was changing. In the town of Lirod, whispers had begun to stir among cafe owners, old women tending their gardens, and children chasing kites across the square. Word had spread, quiet and sticky, about something unusual happening at the Yellow House. Some said it was a museum now. Others said a ghost had returned. But all agreed on one thing: the house had come alive. Elian and Aurelie hadn't expected this. After unveiling Vincent's sketch and letter, they agreed to keep things intimate. The guest room had become a small sanctuary, and every now and then, someone would stop by: curious locals, artists passing through, even a few quiet tourists who'd heard tales at a market in Avignon. They came, they wept, they wrote in the little guest book. "Thank you for reminding me why I paint," one visitor scribbled. "My grandfather used to tell me Vincent wasn't mad. He was just too full of the world." But that peace was fragile. And it shattered on a Tuesday morning when a man arrived at Elian's door. He wore a tailored gray coat and round glasses that glinted like knives in the sunlight. His black leather shoes were spotless, his step deliberate. In one hand, he held a slim briefcase. In the other, a newspaper folded beneath his arm, its corner revealing a blurry photo of the yellow house. He introduced himself with a business card: Mathis Delcourt, independent curator, Paris Institute of Art and Heritage. Elian knew the type. He'd met them before in Marseille: gallery agents, high-collar opportunists who spoke of preservation but thought only in auctions. "I came as soon as I heard the story," Delcourt said in a clipped accent, his tone crisp like oversteeped tea. "A hidden Van Gogh? Possibly a letter. Extraordinary. And now you've built a shrine." Elian stood in the doorway, arms folded. "A tribute. In the house where it was found. Where it belongs." Delcourt smiled politely, though his eyes said otherwise. "Forgive me. I don't mean to criticize. It's admirable. But surely you understand the value of what you're sitting on." Elian's stomach turned. "It's not for sale." "I didn't say it was." Delcourt's voice oozed charm. "But a discovery like this, it can't remain a village secret forever. The world deserves to see it. You must consider proper conservation, professional authentication, security, insurance." "I don't need money." "Perhaps not," Delcourt said, glancing around. "But what of responsibility? History is fragile. If you really care about the legacy of Vincent van Gogh, surely you want to do more than hoard it in a dusty bedroom." The word hoard struck like a slap. Aurelie appeared behind Elian, sensing the tension. "Can we help you, monsieur, or are you here to claim something that was never yours?" Delcourt turned, slightly disarmed. "Mademoiselle, I'm the granddaughter of the woman who preserved that letter," she said evenly. "She didn't sell it. She protected it. For over 70 years. That house protected it. Not your institution." Delcourt's jaw tightened. Elian stepped forward. Thank you for your concern, Monsieur Delcourt. But the answer is no. The man lingered a moment longer. Perhaps you should consider the consequences of hiding a national treasure. If not legal, then ethical. He turned on his heel and walked away, his shoes ticking angrily on the cobblestones. When he disappeared down the alley, Orally exhaled. He's not finished. No, Elian agreed. But neither are we. That night, Elian couldn't sleep. He returned to the guest room alone. The candlelight flickered softly across the walls, illuminating Vincent's sketch and the letter beneath glass. And then he saw it something strange. The candle's flame revealed an impression on the wood floor beneath the easel. A faint outline. A trapdoor. He knelt quickly, pushing the easel aside. The square panel didn't budge easily. But after a minute of work with a flat tool, it gave way. Inside was a shallow compartment, barely large enough to store a loaf of bread. And within, another item. Wrapped in linen, bound with twine. Hands shaking, Elian pulled it out and placed it on the table. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a journal. Small. Leather-bound. Covered in dust. The first page bore a name Vincent and beneath it, in scrawled Dutch, voor wanneer de wereld mich vergeet. For when the world forgets me. Elian stared. Could this be real? Orally, who had followed him into the room, covered her mouth with both hands. Oh my God. The journal contained sketches, unfinished figures, fragments of landscapes, odd symbols, musings in multiple languages. It was not the work of a stable man, and yet, it was lucid. Profound. Fragile. Vincent's voice spilled from the pages in sudden bursts, interrupted by sketches of stars, of a boat, of a face with no eyes. Elian flipped toward the back. There, he found a single pressed sunflower, fragile, browned, delicate. And under it, a torn piece of paper. Another note. This time, unsigned. But the handwriting was familiar. Not all beauty survives on canvas. Some is buried. In silence. In soil. In people. I could not save it all. But perhaps you will. Neither spoke. But they knew. This changed everything. Not just a painting. Not just a letter. This was a message. A passing of the torch. And now, with Delcourt likely watching, it would become a battle not just to protect the house, but to protect the meaning of what it held. I'm not letting them take this, Elian said. Orally nodded. Then we'd better prepare. Outside, thunder rolled on the horizon. The storm rolled in at midnight. Lightning forked across the sky, casting electric veins over the rooftops of Lirod. Thunder followed, slow and growling, like the voice of something ancient awakening. The windows of the yellow house rattled softly, but inside, the candle in the guest room still burned. Elian and Aurelie sat beside the open journal, barely breathing. Each page they turned whispered pieces of Vincent's fractured mind. Some entries were lucid, vivid descriptions of the orchards and river. Others were haunting sketches of faceless men, stars dripping like candle wax, and repeating words in shaky lines: Klur, Licht, Geluid. Color, light, sound. It's like he was unraveling, Aurelie murmured, running a finger along the edge of a sketch that looked like a house crumbling into starlight. Or evolving, Elian whispered back. He wasn't losing his mind. He was seeing too much. The next page held a single line. One day, this house will see again. A gust of wind shook the shutters. And then, a sound. Not the storm. Not the house. But the soft crunch of gravel just outside the front door. They froze. Elian stood, gesturing for Aurelie to stay behind. He stepped into the hallway quietly, grabbing a flashlight from the shelf. He clicked it on and moved slowly toward the entrance. Another sound closer now. A knock. No, not a knock. A tap. Fingernails or something harder, scratching gently. Elian opened the door. No one. He stepped outside. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the street. Empty. Silent. A cat scurried across the square. Nothing else moved. Until he looked down. A single object lay at the foot of the door. An envelope. Soaked slightly from the rain, sealed with an old black ribbon. He picked it up and brought it inside. Aurelie was waiting at the end of the hall, wide-eyed. They opened it together. Inside, a photograph. Black and white. Grainy. It showed a young woman, standing by the riverbank. The same river in Lirod. The woman wore a long dress and held a sketchbook against her chest. Her face was unmistakable. Aurelie, Elian breathed. That's your grandmother. Aurelie's hand flew to her mouth. There was more. A letter, unsigned. She was not the only one who watched. He spoke to others, and not all were kind. Protect what is hidden, or it will be taken again. They stared at each other, the air electric. What does that mean? Elian asked. I'm not sure, Aurelie said, though her voice quivered with something deeper. A memory she hadn't shared yet. Elian waited. And slowly, Aurelie began to speak. When I was a child, my grandmother told me a story. She said once long after Vincent had gone someone came looking for something. A man. Tall, with a foreign accent. He claimed to be a collector, like that Delcourt man. But my grandmother didn't trust him. He offered her money. She refused. The next day, the little house she stored Vincent's sketch in was broken into. Ransacked. Elian's stomach dropped. What did she do? She hid the drawing inside the wall, Aurelie said. And she moved. That house. It burned down 3 months later. No one knew how. Elian gripped the edges of the table. And now, someone's watching us. Aurelie nodded. They always were. The following morning, they took action. Elian photographed every page of the journal. He made high-resolution scans of the letter and sketch. Copies were stored on encrypted drives, backed up in cloud services across continents. He emailed a trusted professor he knew in Lyon not to alert the press, but to have a scholarly eye on their side. Meanwhile, Aurelie made contact with a distant cousin who worked in archives. She requested records, old property deeds, police reports from the 1940s, anything that might shed light on the fire that took her grandmother's house. But it wasn't just defense they were planning. They began preparing an exhibit. Not a grand event, not a media spectacle. But something quietly powerful, an invitation-only gallery inside the Yellow House. 10 names. Carefully chosen. Artists. Historians. Elders of Narrated. People who understood art not as currency but as memory. Each room would hold part of the journey. The guest room with the letter and original sketch. The hallway lined with Elian's own paintings, inspired by Vincent's dreams. A darkened study where pages of the journal would be projected on the wall, flickering like thoughts caught in wind. And finally, the rooftop garden where visitors could sit under the stars, the same stars Vincent once painted, and leave their own sketches on a communal canvas. But they had to move quickly. Because something else had arrived in the mail that afternoon. A typed letter. No signature. The Institute is watching. You have something that does not belong to you. Do not let history burn twice. Elian read it 3 times, then burned it in the fireplace. As the paper crumbled into flame, Aurelie looked at him with steel in her eyes. You still want to do this? He nodded. Even more now. That night, thunder returned. But this time, they weren't afraid. They stood in the guest room, watching the candle flicker before Vincent's letter. And Elian whispered, almost to himself. We won't let them take this from you. Then he turned to Aurelie. Or from us. The Yellow House pulsed with an energy it hadn't known in decades. Soft golden light spilled from the windows onto the cobblestones, mingling with the cool autumn air, The scent of lavender and freshly polished wood filled every corner, and gentle murmurs drifted from room to room as the invited guests arrived one by one. Elian stood near the doorway of the guest room, adjusting the last canvas. His heart thrummed with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. This was more than a gallery opening, it was a declaration. A reclaiming of a history almost lost. Aurelie appeared beside him, radiant in a deep emerald dress, her hair loosely pinned back, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "Everyone's coming," she whispered. He nodded. "Let's make sure it's perfect." The small group assembled in the Yellow House was handpicked, renowned art historian Dr. Camille Renard, local mayor Monsieur Laurent, the elderly painter Simone Besson who had lived in Liraud all her life, and a few younger artists who had quietly supported Elian's work. There were also scholars from Lyon and a journalist known for her thoughtful pieces on forgotten artists. As the guests mingled, Elian guided them through the exhibit. The guest room, transformed into a shrine, held Vincent's original letter and sketch. Soft spotlights illuminated the brittle parchment, while gentle music, classical and ambient, floated from hidden speakers. In the hallway, Elian's paintings lined the walls, each inspired by Vincent's visions but imbued with Elian's own voice, a dialogue across time. The study, darkened and intimate, projected pages of the mysterious journal onto the walls. Words swirled, images flickered, a silent film of Vincent's fractured genius. Finally, the rooftop garden, under a canopy of stars, offered a communal canvas where guests were encouraged to add their own sketches and notes. The atmosphere was electric, charged with reverence and quiet excitement. But in the shadows of the crowd, watching silently from the threshold, stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes sharp, cold, and calculating. His name was Julien Moreau, a wealthy art dealer from Paris with a reputation for acquiring rare works, sometimes by any means necessary. He had heard the rumors about the letter, the hidden sketch, and now this secret exhibition. He had traveled overnight, skipping sleep to be here. Julien's presence was unnoticed by most, but Aurelie sensed something the moment he stepped through the door. Her smile tightened. Elian caught her glance. "Do you know him?" She nodded quietly. "From stories my grandmother told me. He's been hunting for lost Van Gogh pieces for years." Elian swallowed. The man's reputation was well known: ruthless, persuasive, and not above intimidation. As the evening progressed, Julien moved like a shadow through the rooms, asking pointed questions in his deep, smooth voice. To the artists, he spoke of auctions and international exhibitions. To the scholars, of provenance and authenticity. But when he reached the guest room, something changed. He paused, staring at the framed sketch and the letter. His fingers twitched. Then, turning to Elian and Aurelie, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "An impressive collection, indeed. But surely you understand, such treasures belong in the grand museums, not hidden away in provincial houses." Elian stepped forward, voice steady but firm. This house is their home. We're not selling. Julian's smile sharpened. Consider this an invitation, then. He placed a business card on the table, then turned away, blending back into the crowd. Later, after most guests had left, Orly and Elian sat together on the rooftop, the city lights twinkling below. "We have to be careful," Orly said. "He won't stop." Elian nodded. "I won't let him take this away. Not without a fight." They talked late into the night, planning next steps: more security, discreet contacts in Paris, and possibly, an official declaration to protect the house's contents legally. Days passed, and the house became a beacon. Artists visited to pay homage, and word spread quietly in art circles. Elian continued to paint, inspired by the journal's mysteries and Orly's unwavering strength. One morning, as he prepared his studio, a courier arrived with a small, unmarked package. Inside was a worn envelope containing a single folded sheet. Elian unfolded it. The message was simple but chilling. "They watch you closely. The past is never truly buried. Protect the truth, or it will consume you." No signature. Orally read the note, her face pale. "This is no longer just about art," she said. "It's about survival." Elian felt the weight settle deep in his bones. But beneath the fear, a fierce resolve burned brighter. Together, they would guard the legacy not just of Vincent van Gogh, but of everyone who had fought to keep the light alive. The early morning mist clung to the cobblestone streets of Lirod, muffling the sounds of the village waking from its slumber. In the yellow house, a heavy silence filled the rooms, broken only by the faint rustle of pages as Elian carefully turned the worn leaves of Vincent's journal. The note they had received, the chilling warning, hung in their minds like a shadow refusing to lift. Elian looked up from the journal as Orly entered the room, her eyes reflecting the weight of sleepless nights. "We need to talk," she said softly. He nodded, setting the journal aside. "I've been thinking about the letter. Whoever sent it knows more than we do. They're watching us closely." Orally sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of the journal cover. "There's something I haven't told you, something about my grandmother and the history of our family." Elian gestured for her to continue. "My grandmother was part of a small group, artists, historians, and locals who vowed to protect Vincent's legacy after the fire that destroyed her home. They called themselves Les Voiles de Secrets, the Veil of Secrets. They believed that some truths about Vincent's life and art were too powerful for the world to know, and thus, needed to be hidden." Elian's brow furrowed. "Hidden? Why?" "Because," Orally said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "some of Vincent's works weren't just paintings. They were keys to understanding his troubled mind, yes, but also to something deeper. A hidden world of symbols and meanings that could change how people see reality." Elian felt a chill. "You mean, there's more to his art than meets the eye?" Orally nodded. Exactly. My grandmother once showed me a sketch, a piece no one has seen. She said it was dangerous to reveal it. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the pages of the journal to flutter as if stirred by an unseen hand. Elian stood, walking toward the window. Outside, the mist had thickened, swallowing the village in a ghostly veil. We need to find this sketch, he said firmly. If it's part of the truth we're protecting, it might also be the key to stopping whoever is threatening us. Orally agreed. I know where to start. She led Elian to the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with old trunks and faded memories. At the far end, behind a stack of canvases, she pulled aside a heavy velvet curtain. There, in a locked chest, lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. With trembling hands, Orally opened the chest, revealing a small portfolio. She carefully unfolded its contents, a series of drawings unlike any Elian had seen. They were intricate, filled with swirling patterns, hidden faces, and enigmatic symbols that seemed to shift and change under the light. At the center was the sketch her grandmother had warned her about, a detailed portrait of Vincent, but with eyes painted in a way that made them seem alive, watching. Elian reached out, captivated by the haunting gaze. This is incredible, he whispered. But dangerous, Orally said. There's a reason it was hidden. That night, as they studied the drawings, a knock echoed through the house. Elian moved to the door, opening it cautiously. Outside stood a man in a dark coat, face shadowed. I'm here to help, he said quietly. My name is Gabriel. Elian hesitated but stepped aside to let him in. Gabriel explained that he was a researcher who had spent years studying Vincent's life and was part of a secret society dedicated to protecting his true legacy. He warned them that Julian Moreau was not acting alone and that powerful forces wanted to seize the hidden works for their own ends. Together, they formed a plan to safeguard the house, the drawings, and the truth. Over the following days, Elian, Orally, and Gabriel worked tirelessly. They secured the house with hidden locks, coded messages, and secret compartments. Elian painted new works inspired by the mysterious symbols, weaving his art into their defense. But the tension grew. One evening, as Elian walked along the river, he sensed he was being followed. Turning, he caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing into the fog. Back at the house, Orally received a package, a box containing an ancient key and a note. The veil thins. The time has come. The stage was set. The key lay heavy in Oraly's palm, cold and ancient, its metal worn by time. The note's words echoed ominously in her mind, the veil thins. The time has come. Elian watched her closely, sensing the gravity of the moment. For days, the mysterious presence lurking in the fog had grown bolder, and the shadows around the yellow house deepened. We can't ignore this, Orally said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. This key must open something important, something my grandmother wanted hidden. Gabriel nodded. spreading out the collection of drawings and notes on the large oak table. Vincent's work was more than art, it was a map, a guide to truths buried beneath layers of time and myth. Elian's eyes flicked to the attic door. Then the attic is more than just a storage room. Together, they ascended the creaking stairs, the beam of their flashlights cutting through dust and darkness. At the far end, a heavy wooden chest sat beneath a slanted roof beam, its lock ancient and rusty. Elian took the key from Orally and, with a deep breath, slid it into the lock. The mechanism resisted, then clicked open, revealing a collection of weathered papers, small objects wrapped in cloth, and a thin, leather-bound book. Orally gently lifted the book, revealing a cover embossed with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the light. Opening it, they discovered a diary, written in a mix of French, Dutch, and cryptic symbols. Gabriel leaned closer. This must be Vincent's personal journal, the one never found. As they began to decipher the entries, a story unfolded, of a man haunted not just by his own mind but by visions of a hidden world intersecting with reality. His paintings were portals, his brush strokes spells that captured not only light and color but essence and memory. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed downstairs. They exchanged tense glances and hurried down. In the main room, a window lay shattered, glass glinting dangerously on the floor. Outside, footprints led away into the gathering dusk. Elian's fists clenched. They're getting closer. Orally's gaze hardened. We need allies. The next day saw them reaching out discreetly to old friends of Orally's grandmother, art historians, and trusted locals. Word spread cautiously, but so did danger. One evening, as Elian returned from the market, he found a small package at the doorstep. Inside was a portrait, unsigned and unclaimed. It depicted the yellow house, but twisted, as if seen through a fractured mirror, its windows bleeding dark shadows. A note accompanied it: the past will consume the present if left unchecked. Elian shivered. At the same time, Orally uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of the attic. Inside, a small wooden box containing a locket and a folded letter addressed to her grandmother. The letter revealed a secret pact between the Veil of Secrets and a mysterious figure who once guarded Vincent's legacy, warning of those who would seek to exploit it. The story was more complex than they imagined. The night was thick with fog as Elian and Orally sat huddled over the letter found in the hidden compartment. The flickering candle cast long shadows on the walls of the attic, where the locket lay open between them, revealing a faded miniature portrait of a woman with sorrowful eyes. Elian traced the delicate script of the letter once more. To those who bear the legacy of light and shadow. Beware the watchers who wear masks of friend and foe alike. Trust is the rarest pigment on this palette, use it wisely. The key to truth lies not in what is painted, but in what is concealed. Orally's fingers trembled as she folded the letter carefully. " 'My grandmother's warning was more urgent than I thought. There's something, someone, closer than we realize.' Elian looked out the attic window into the misty night. "We're being hunted, but not just by outsiders. Secrets like these attract those from within the veil. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed from the attic door. They exchanged a startled glance. "Who's there?" Elian called softly. No answer. He opened the door slowly. No one. But on the floor lay a small, folded piece of parchment, sealed with a crimson wax stamp marked with an unfamiliar emblem, a swirling star entwined with a serpent. Elian picked it up carefully. Opening it, orally read aloud. "The veil grows thin. The past will awake. When the brush reveals what the eye can't take. Follow the echoes to find the flame. But beware the shadow that knows your name." A chill ran down their spines. The next day, they decided to visit the village archives, hoping to uncover the meaning behind the mysterious emblem and the ominous poem. The archives were housed in an ancient stone building near the town square, filled with dusty tomes and faded manuscripts. An elderly archivist, Monsieur Dupont, greeted them with cautious curiosity. "I have heard whispers of your project," he said. "Artifacts related to Vincent van Gogh. Such treasures often come with shadows." Elian showed him the wax stamp from the note. Dupont's eyes widened slightly. "That symbol belongs to a forgotten guild, the Ordre de Veilleurs, the Order of Watchers. They were guardians of secret knowledge and protectors of artistic truths, but their motives became ambiguous over time." Orally leaned forward. "Could they be connected to the Veil of Secrets?" Dupont nodded slowly. "Possibly. But be warned, the Order was known to manipulate art and history for power. Some say they still operate in shadows." Back at the Yellow House, Elian and Orally studied the journal and the newly found clues. The idea that they were entangled in a centuries-old conflict unsettled them, but also steeled their resolve. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, a figure observed the house from a distance, a woman with piercing eyes and a dark cloak, her fingers wrapped tightly around an old key, similar to the one Orally carried. Her lips curved into a faint smile. The game begins. Over the following days, the tension grew. Strange noises echoed in the house at night, whispers in languages unknown, flickering shadows at the corner of their vision. Elian painted feverishly, attempting to capture the restless energy that seemed to seep from the walls. Orally researched tirelessly, uncovering more about the Order of Watchers and their history of controlling the narrative of great artists. One evening, while examining a painting Elian had just finished, a swirling depiction of stars caught between light and darkness, Orally noticed something odd. In the twisting brush strokes, almost hidden, was the same serpent entwined with the star. Elian's eyes met hers. "It's a message." "But from whom?" That night, a loud crash startled them. They rushed to the guest room to find a window smashed, the glass shards scattered. On the floor lay a torn piece of fabric, a deep violet silk embroidered with the same emblem. They weren't just being watched. They were being marked. The violet silk torn from the intruder's garment hung heavy in Elian's palm, its embroidery shimmering faintly under the lamplight. The emblem the serpent coiled around a star felt alive, pulsing like a heartbeat, whispering secrets from a past buried beneath layers of paint and shadow. Orly's eyes narrowed. They're not just warning us. They're marking their territory. Elian's fingers traced the fabric's delicate threads, a chill running down his spine. But why now? Why after all these years? Orly looked toward the attic, where Vincent's journal and their discoveries lay. Because the veil is thinning. The past wants to be remembered, but some parts, some truths want to stay hidden. That night, the yellow house was restless. The wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling windows and shaking the walls. Elian paced the studio, mind racing. Orly sat by the fire, reading through old letters and diaries, her expression grave. Suddenly, a sharp knock shattered the silence. They exchanged wary glances. Elian opened the door to find an envelope on the doorstep, sealed with the same crimson wax. Inside was a single card, inscribed with the riddle. Where shadows dance and stars align. Seek the flame beyond the line. Truth lies not in what you see, but in the heart's own memory. Elian frowned. A challenge. Orly's eyes gleamed. Or an invitation. Over the next days, the village began to stir with strange occurrences. Lights flickered in abandoned houses, whispers floated through the night air. Locals spoke of strange figures moving through the fog, cloaked and silent. Elian and Orly's home was no longer a sanctuary but a battleground of wills between the light of truth and the shadows of secrecy. Their ally, Gabriel, returned with news. There's a place, just beyond the river's bend, he said. An old chapel, abandoned for decades. It's said to hold the final piece the flame mentioned in the riddle. Without hesitation, they prepared for a journey through the mist-laden countryside, seeking the chapel that might unlock the last secret Vincent left behind. The path was treacherous, shrouded in fog and eerie silence. As they approached the chapel's crumbling gates, Orly felt a presence, eyes watching, waiting. Inside, the air was thick with dust and forgotten prayers. On the altar, a single candle flickered despite the lack of breeze. Elian stepped forward, heart pounding. Upon the altar lay a box carved with the serpent and star emblem. With trembling hands, Orly lifted the lid. Inside was a canvas rolled tight and a letter in Vincent's hand. Unrolling the canvas revealed a painting unlike any they had seen. It was vibrant and chaotic, a swirling tempest of color and light. At its center, a figure stood with eyes closed, surrounded by stars and shadows intertwined. The letter spoke of redemption, of the artist's battle with his own demons, and a hope that one day someone would see beyond the surface to the truth beneath. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. They turned to see Julian Moreau, flanked by two stern-faced men. "So, you've found the flame," Julian said, voice cold and triumphant. It belongs to the world, and to me. Elian stepped forward. It belongs to no one who seeks to control it for power. A tense standoff ensued. The future of Vincent's legacy and their own hung in the balance. The chapel's cold stone walls seemed to hold their breath as the standoff unfolded. Julian Moreau's sharp gaze pierced the dim light, his two men standing like shadows ready to strike. Elian, Aurelie, and Gabriel stood firm, their resolve unshaken despite the threat looming so close. Julian spoke with icy certainty, "You don't understand the power you're dealing with. This painting isn't just art, it's a key to legacy, fame, control. I will ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, and that includes yours." Elian's voice rang clear, "This legacy belongs to truth, not greed. Vincent painted for light, not for those who twist history." Aurelie stepped forward, holding the letter Vincent had left. "And we will protect it, even if it means standing against you." Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the tension. The chapel's ancient door slammed open. A group of villagers, led by Mayor Laurent and several artists, poured in, rallying behind Elian and Aurelie. Word had spread, and those who loved Vincent's memory refused to stand by. Julian's men tensed but found themselves outnumbered. With a scowl, Julian retreated, promising this was not over. Days later, back at the Yellow House, a new light had dawned. The mysterious painting The Flame was placed in a specially constructed gallery room, bathed in soft illumination that made its colors dance like fire. Visitors arrived, not as mere spectators but as participants in a living story, invited to see beyond the canvas and feel the pulse of Vincent's spirit. Elian and Aurelie stood together, their hands entwined as they watched the visitors' eyes widen, their breaths catch. "The legacy is safe," Aurelie whispered. Elian smiled, "Because we chose to protect it with our hearts." Months passed, and the Yellow House became a beacon of art, memory, and hope. Elian's own paintings flourished, inspired by the journey and the love blossoming between him and Aurelie. Together, they unveiled stories long forgotten, unlocking Vincent's mysteries and weaving their own into the fabric of Narrated. One quiet evening, under a blanket of stars, Elian took Aurelie's hand. "Do you remember the first night by the river?" he asked. She nodded, smiling. "We chased the veil of secrets and found more than we dreamed." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And we painted our own story." The stars above shimmered, as if blessing the final brush stroke of a masterpiece, a tale of passion, courage, and the eternal dance between light and shadow. Title: The Veil of Secrets, a legacy painted in light. Description: In the tranquil village of Narrated, a young artist named Elian Rousseau discovers a hidden legacy tied to the legendary Vincent van Gogh. Alongside Aurelie, the granddaughter of a guardian of Vincent's secrets, they unravel cryptic journals, forgotten paintings, and mysterious symbols that reveal a world beyond the canvas where art becomes a bridge between memory, truth, and shadow. As dark forces close in, led by the ruthless art dealer Julien Moreau and a secretive order known as the Ordre de Valeurs, Elian, and Aurélie must fight to protect the legacy that transcends time and greed. Their journey weaves a tale of passion, courage, and the unbreakable bond between light and shadow. The Veil of Secrets is a mesmerizing story of art, mystery, and the eternal quest to keep the flame of creativity alive against the forces that seek to extinguish it.